Dr. Somanathan has come down specially for this from Delhi. Very grateful to you, sir, for coming down. And he came in last night and he's flying out soon after this event. And this is the only finance ministry event in Chennai this time post-budget. Normally the minister comes and the senior secretaries come here. This time, this is the only one. So we're extremely grateful to Dr. Somanathan for doing this under the banner of BusinessLine. Honored, sir. Thanks. Dr. Somanathan doesn't need any introduction. Everybody in this room knows him. His accomplishments in the Indian Administrative Service are well known, and he was handpicked for this role in the Finance Ministry.
This year, as you rightly said, 22-23, your nominal growth estimate was 10.1.
No, it was 11%.
11. And it went well beyond that, helping your fiscal deficit numbers. I think the actual deficit in numbers is 92,000 crores over what,
That's right. Yes,
what
it
was
is.
budgeted.
It is.
But yet you met the 6.4% limit.
Yeah.
So it helps you in your...
It does, but there's no conscious, I wouldn't say that there's any conscious underestimation of GDP growth. It is, as I said, the target that we think is almost certain to be achieved. We need something stable for the budget because it also affects state governments. What we project in revenues has a cascading effect on state governments because we devolve based on that estimate at least for the first 11 months of the year. It's very upsetting for a state government to get a mid-year correction downwards in the devolution of central taxes. So we have chosen to go with a number that we are almost certain will be passed on to the states, and if anything, possibly exceeded, but I'm not saying they will be exceeded. I mean, there are many reasons that it could be 10.5%. If inflation comes down dramatically, as some stock analysts have recently predicted, I mean, that is contrary to past Indian experience. I mean, Indian experience doesn't suggest inflation coming down to 1%, 2%. But if it does happen, I doubt that will happen. But I think 10.5% is something that we will sustain as revenue growth, barring a large exogenous event.
Okay. So, barring this large exogenous factors, what is your escape latch? I mean, last year, Ukraine happened, and thanks to your conservative budgeting, you were able to...
And also thanks to high revenues. Yes.
Yeah, boost in revenues helped you. So what are you looking at this
High
year?
inflation also helped the revenues. So
Yeah.
they're all, sort of, they balance each other out a little.
A good accountant always builds reserves everywhere, right? So what is the reserve that you have built in the budget this year?
A good accountant never tells the analyst where his reserves are. So no, I don't think there are any, this time we don't have any major cushions. No, we are actually close to, because we also hope that, some kind of reversion to the mean, that you don't get 4 consecutive major exogenous shocks in 4 financial years. So if, therefore we have a greater probability of not having a big negative event this year.
Okay. Amen to that.
Purely statistically.
Yeah. Talking of revenues, you have estimated GST you have to grow by about 12% in 23-24. And this is over the revised estimate of last year, which itself was a growth of 22% over the budget estimate. So that is a run rate of what, 1.6 lakh crores a month. Is that a trifle ambitious considering that you're now somewhere around 1.4, 1.45 average?
Yeah, but it's again, it's not, 12% I think is not something that will not happen. I mean, look, these are the projections that we have made in consultation with the revenue departments. They are of the view that this is the estimate we can reach on GST. So we will go with that. And I'm fairly confident we'll reach it.
So is this built on expectations of buoyancy in the economy or through other methods to raise collections, like plugging loopholes and...
In GST, I don't think there are any assumptions about any incremental changes in the tax structure. No. I don't think we're likely to see any major changes in the GST tax structure in the coming year. So at least no such assumptions have been made. So this is pure buoyancy and the effects of changes that have already been made during the last 12 months.
And better collection efficiencies?
Yes, but I think that has actually accounted for the big growth this year, better collection efficiency. So at the margin, there's not too much more that can happen in terms of collection efficiency. It's an incremental improvement, but I don't think we'll see dramatic changes in collection efficiency in the coming year.
Okay. So expenditure itself, total expenditure is up about 7.5%, and if you knock interest off, it's about 5.5. Interest is not in your control anyway. So from that, if you compare capex, it's about a third over last year.
Yes.
So there are two ways of looking at this expenditure numbers. Some would say that it's excellent, the quality of expenditure is better now, you're pushing in infrastructure. Others would say that you're pulled back on schemes that help the poor, like MNREGS and others, and subsidies especially. So how do you react to this?
So 2 points. I think first on the subsidies. The reduction in the fertilizer subsidy doesn't reflect any reduction in what is given to farmers, because farmers have been completely insulated from price changes in the last 3 years. Prices have been kept fixed despite an enormous increase in global prices of fertilizer. So the government has in fact not followed the nutrient-based subsidy policy on non-urea fertilizers, and has in fact increased the subsidy far more than the NBS policy required it to do, as a result of which prices to farmers have been almost unchanged. So the reduction in the fertilizer subsidy budget reflects only a reduction in global prices of imported fertilizers and of natural gas, which is an input into ammonia. And these two, so the estimate for fertilizer subsidy does not mean anything to the farmer. It is a reduction in the expected cost of those fertilizers. And that's because global prices have cooled between the average that we saw in the last 12 months and what we expect to see in the next 12 months, and they are reflected in today's market prices. In fact, if we were simply to extrapolate today's market prices, the subsidy would be a little lower than what we've projected in the budget, but we have assumed that we've gone with an average rather than today's price. So 175,000 for fertilizer subsidy is a reasonable estimate. It doesn't harm anyone. On the food subsidy, the provision is adequate to provide whatever has been promised under the PM Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana as amended till 31st of December 2023. So it's fully provided for. Again, no impact on the poor. In terms of the National Rural Employment Guarantee system, so there are typically two kinds of government programs. You have a government program where there is a physical output, so we're going to construct a road from A to B, or a clinic in this place, or a school in such and such a place. And then you provide money to accomplish that physical purpose. The second kind of program is where you give a subsidy to someone on some basis of entitlement. So you give every farmer 6,000 rupees under the PM Kisan program, or you give a certain group of people scholarships. So those are estimated based on what you expect to spend. This is one unique scheme which, under the law governing the scheme, is supposed to be demand based. So it's not an entitlement, everybody doesn't get it. People who turn up and say they want work will be given work, and therefore it is essentially a projection of demand. That's what we have to do.
Correct.
We have attempted to project this, and it is lower. The estimate is lower than last year's budget estimate. Definitely, yes.
By a third.
No, it's about 15% lower than the budget estimate. What you're referring to is the revised estimate.
Yeah.
So the reduction is because there have been huge increases in two other rural development programs which employ pretty much the same kind of semi-skilled or unskilled labor, namely the PM Awas Yojana, which is the housing for the poor scheme, which has an increase this year in the outlay of over 100%. And for the Jal Jeevan Mission, which is the tapped water scheme. I should remember here to translate, because I have got used to these Hindi words. Now I have to remember that I'm speaking to a non-Hindi speaking audience. So these two schemes together see an increase of more than 40,000 crores between last year and this year. We expect this to have some impact on the number of people who need to come into the safety net of the Rural Employment Guarantee. Therefore, we think the demand will be lower. But the second point is, as we have done before, if the demand turns out to be higher, we will provide additional amounts as the year goes by. I must also mention that we have found credible evidence, and this has been reported not just by government sources, but in newspapers like it's supposed to be bad manners to mention another newspaper here. So Indian Express, for instance, has done a big series on irregularities in the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme in several states. So what has tended to happen is that if a budget, it's supposed to be demand-based, but there are instruments in the government system which convert it into a supply-based system, and if there's a larger supply of funds, then the old form of Say's law, the demand rises to equal the supply, and it may not be genuine demand. So we prefer to start with what is a reasonable demand-based provision, and then if actual genuine demand manifests itself, then we'll increase the provision.
So would it be right to say then that so far as NREGS goes, or any of these schemes go, you would give more weightage to asset creation on the ground rather than just give it away as a dole? Is that you're moving away from that kind of a system?
The scheme is designed to provide wage employment, and under the design of the scheme, the nature of the assets created is secondary. However, it has been the thrust of the government. I am not in charge of this. I'm not as knowledgeable on this as you may like me to be, but my impression is that the Ministry of Rural Development is pushing towards a greater level of genuine asset creation rather than the mere Keynesian digging and filling up of ditches. So they are moving towards a greater level of good assets being created. That's my impression.
Talking of subsidies, petroleum subsidy, it's down to just 2,000 crores. And you have some flagship schemes there, PM Ujjwala Yojana. PM Ujjwala, is it?
Ujjwala.
Ujjwala. I get confused between the two.
Ujjwala is the blue, is the liquid blue.
Yeah. So,
there's also an Ujjwala scheme.
There's Ujjwala,
There is an Ujjwala scheme.
Yeah, there's a Ujjwala scheme.
There is.
Yeah. So there your allocation is down by almost 50%, and you have these schemes going. And
remember, the Ujjwala scheme is not a scheme of recurrent subsidy on the gas. It's a one-time subsidization of the acquisition of a gas connection. The subsidy on the gas depends on prevailing gas prices. It's not a recurrent subsidy. The design of Ujjwala is you give a consumer a one-time support to acquire the first, the cylinder, the connection, the stove. And after that, they pay for the gas. It's not free gas. Now, there was a subsidy on that, but that is a matter that depends on prevailing gas prices. Prices are not as high or not expected to be as high this year as they were last year. So that subsidy is, again, this, if necessary, will be changed at the revised.
But Dr. Somanathan, on this itself, the design of the scheme, you may tell me that you are not responsible for the design of the scheme, but I still have to ask this question. If you're going to get a person in a rural area, get off the chula and into a LPG system, and if you give only one cylinder, the initial cylinder free, and leave them out,
initial cylinder is not free either.
How are they going to afford the
It's cheaper than the alternative sources of fuel they've been using. Firewood is not cheap.
But firewood they generally collect from.
No, that's a myth. It's not everyone who's able to. It's not as if we have firewood lying around everywhere for people to pick up and collect. People are using this because they want to use it. It's a cleaner, more useful, more convenient fuel, and women are thrilled to get these connections.
So you're confident that people will remain in the LPG system even if you don't give a subsidy?
Yes.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see.
I'm not necessarily saying that there will not be a subsidy or there will be a subsidy. That will depend on prevailing prices and decisions that are taken. What I'm saying is a recurring subsidy is not inherent in the design of the Ujjwala system. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any allocation for PM Ujjwala Yojana in your expenditure budget. Is that right?
I think the targets are fully covered in terms of what the.
So you think there is no need for.
We have gone by what the Ministry of Petroleum has projected for next year.
Okay. So I'll move on to your direct taxes moves. Very interesting. You want to push people into the new tax system. But before that, I want to ask you, you look at some of the proposals like on market-linked debentures, the tax loophole has been plugged. High-value insurance policies, the tax loophole has been plugged. You take capital gains on high-value housing, 10 crores is being capped at.
Yes.
And REITs and InvITs, have been brought into the tax system at one level. And just 2 years ago, you brought in EPF also into tax system, much against. I had a.
I've read your editorial.
Yeah. So, is this a concerted move to?
Yes.
I see the pattern in this.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And I
can
request ladies like Aarti and Lokeshwari to please write about all these loopholes in their detailed articles so that we can then plug them one by one.
We want to sell our paper, I say. But that said, is there any particular, have you found instances of wrongdoing in any of these?
No, I wouldn't say it's wrong. See, tax avoidance is legal.
Yeah.
So you have expensive, well-paid, highly educated people looking for these loopholes. And when they discover them, it takes us some time to find out that they have discovered them, because we haven't discovered them yet. But when we discover that they have discovered them, we intend to do something about it. And this will be a pattern, I want to repeat. In fact, I would advise people, these esoteric, see, there are two kinds of tax avoidance methods. One is where government is explicitly asking you to do something and giving you a deduction for that. So there's a section 80JJAA of the Income Tax Act, which incidentally is allowed even under the new system, which says that if you employ new people, you get a weighted deduction for employing people if their wage is below a certain amount. That's a very legitimate, if somebody were to try to exploit that loophole, that is the policy. The policy is we want you to employ more people. But if you find a comparison between section so-and-so and section so-and-so, which gives you an advantage that wasn't intended in the policy, then it is legal, but it is equally legal for us to close it. So we will come back and close it as soon as we can, as fast as we can, as effectively as we can, and people, tax advisors can keep designing them, that's their job. They'll keep doing it, it's our job to keep closing them. But we are going to make a concerted attempt to find and close these loopholes wherever we can and whenever we can. It is a concerted attempt.
So you're going to play a game of whack-a-mole with the taxpayers. Something pops up, you hit it, and then it pops up somewhere else.
Because we intend to reduce rates, and we have reduced the highest marginal rate. For the same class of people that uses MLDs and uses high-value insurance policies, that probably invests in REITs and invests, we have seen a decline in the market. So the policy is very clear. A simpler tax system with lower explicit rates, but fewer places to hide. And the rich in this country have many tax loopholes, including capital gains. So those are the kinds of things that we have attempted to close in this budget.
My only complaint is that while you get after the rich, very justified, people like us, middle class, get caught in the war in between, because on EPF, I mean, it's a good savings instrument for the middle class, and it gives you good returns, it's safe, and it's taken away without paying. I mean, you don't even realize it's being deducted from your salary. Now, if you start taxing EPF contributions, then it hits us as well, right?
It hits people whose salary is above 50 lakhs a year.
50 lakhs, adjusted for inflation, is not very much these days.
Well, I mean, with a basic exemption of 3 lakhs, 50 lakhs is not trivial. So we also have to collect some taxes somewhere.
Okay, so the new tax regime, is this a precursor to a single rate regime sometime down in the next 5, 6, 7 years?
Single rate as in?
Take away all exemptions, have a single rate of taxation.
There's no such decision. It will remain optional. It's not our intent to. This is an incentivization, giving a choice to the taxpayer. But obviously, the incremental incentives will keep coming in one direction.
Got it. So, what has been the impact on the ground in the last 2 years that this regime has been there, new tax regime? Do you see people picking it up?
There has been a shift, but it's not as large as one would hope for. But we expect a big shift to happen after this year's changes.
Even accounting for people who may want to buy a house.
And they're welcome to do so. They're welcome to do so. But there are many people who don't have those facilities or don't intend to use those, and they are actually paying more under the existing system.
Okay.
And I'll also say this, there are a lot of people in the middle class, not the 50 lakh middle class, but the 7 lakh to 12 lakh middle class, who actually end up paying more taxes in the old system because they can't afford to subscribe to all these savings instruments in the quantities that the business line suggests they should subscribe. So because they just don't, they have too much expenses to be able to subscribe that amount. Therefore, they end up paying a higher tax than they could if they were able to save as much as those columnists suggest that they should say, ATC so much, ATD so much, ATG, if you have a good charity, this much, and so on. They can't do it because they have expenses. So there are lots of, drivers, clerical staff in the government, and similarly at the lower salary scales in the private sector, who had no option earlier but to pay more taxes because they had school fees to pay, scooters to fuel, things to do, as a result of which they couldn't save these optimal amounts that the tax advisors suggest you to. So on an income of 9 lakhs, it's not easy to exploit all the savings options. So you end up paying higher taxes. In the new system, they will pay lower taxes. So it's therefore beneficial to a particular group of people, but those who want to stay in the old are welcome to stay in the old.
Does the analytics show that the number of return filers in that tax bracket are higher than in the higher income slabs?
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. It's a pyramid. The largest number of filers are in the 5 to 15 bracket.